We've got some things to talk about in this morning's video. We're going to go over much of the same information we've been discussing over the past week. Since last weekend, we've been trying to figure out what's next. Today is the last day of January. Yeah, I believe so, which means we move into February tomorrow. So what will this new month bring? We're still trying to figure that out. We'll go over all the model guidance we have, including data from overnight this morning and even yesterday to determine if we're leaning one way or another. We'll discuss what we know in detail. I'll provide my thoughts on a few things, and then we'll take a look at today's weather. I really appreciate all the prayers from my little girl who was sick yesterday. She's still feeling a little under the weather today, but is definitely doing much better. Hopefully we can get rid of this sickness in the West family. It's been going around for almost 2 weeks now. We've been lucky, though. We've been blessed not to have dealt with any sickness for several months, but it hit us like a freight train over the past week and a half. With that being said, if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. Also, be sure to like the video if you enjoy it. If there's anything I can pray about for you, as always, please leave it in the comments below. Climate Prediction Center update. Let's start off with what we've been doing, checking the latest Climate Prediction Center update. This is the latest outlook from yesterday afternoon, and not much has changed for the first 10 days of February. Looking at the outlook for February 5th to 9th, especially for the first week of the month, we could see some shifts once we get further into February. This temperature outlook shows that if you live in the warmer colored areas, especially the dark reds, bright reds, burgundy, and orange, the National Weather Service is leaning toward above average temperatures for this time frame, days 6 through 10. Confidence is lower, closer to the blue areas, which is typically how these forecasts work. In the gray areas, temperatures could be slightly above, slightly below, or right around average. As for the blue shaded regions, the confidence for below average temperatures is higher, potentially well below average in some cases. Up in the Pacific Northwest near Seattle, they're forecasting a 90% chance of below normal temperatures during this period. So it will definitely be cold across the northern terrain of the country, particularly in the western half of the northern U.S. Meanwhile, the general pattern suggests a ridge across the southern tier, southeast, and eastern U.S., bringing in warmer air. I even think parts of the Northeast will warm up as well. Moving forward to the 8 to 14 day outlook, February 7th to 13th, this almost takes us to the middle of the month. The Climate Prediction Center still leans toward above average temperatures, but you can see that the blue shaded colder air begins to push further south and east, taking over more of the country. The western U.S. and northern plains haven't had much of a winter in terms of really cold air and widespread winter storms. Even the higher elevations haven't seen much in the way of significant winter storms. However, I do think this pattern will support more wintry weather. In fact, there's a system coming in that will last the entire weekend through Sunday, and then another one next week. We'll discuss that in today's forecast. The southeast is still leaning toward above average temperatures, but we could see some changes. The models were heading one direction for about 24 hours, but then last night they backed off a bit. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. A new 3 to 4 week outlook will be introduced today, so it will be interesting to see what their take is on the later part of the month. What we can say for sure is that the pattern will remain active. Precipitation levels will be around normal to above normal for much of the country. The only areas that might stay drier are Florida and the Southwest, which is pretty typical for February. Looking at the 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook, we see a higher chance of below average precipitation in the Southwest. While the jet stream remains active across much of the country, there's a 50% chance of above normal precipitation, which could be rain, snow, or a mix of both. Active storm track. Now let's take a look at the latest European model. Are there any storms we can latch onto and say, hey, we've got a storm in this time frame and we just need to figure out the details? Starting on Sunday morning, February 2nd, we put this in motion. There's a clipper system riding through the Great Lakes, bringing snow that will move into the Northeast by Sunday night. Then a strong storm system moves over the Rockies. Not much will happen in the central and southern Rockies since the jet stream is racing across that region. However, this will bring heavy snow to the higher elevations, and even the mid elevation areas could see accumulating snow. As cold air moves in, lower elevation areas like Seattle, Medford, and Eugene could see winter weather. Snow is expected to break out across the Dakotas, though it appears somewhat sheared out. The southern half of the country remains quiet due to the dominant ridge. However, moisture could begin to move northward from the Gulf by midweek. By Wednesday morning, I'd say this is the first significant time frame to watch. The western U.S. will continue to see precipitation with higher elevation snow and lower elevation rain. However, for the central and eastern U.S., the middle of next week looks like the next big period to monitor. A developing low pressure system will move off the Rockies and track eastward. Will this bring severe weather to the south? Possibly, but it may lack the necessary thermodynamics. However, by Wednesday night into Thursday, this system could bring freezing rain to the Great Lakes, parts of the interior mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast. Since the system appears to be cutting northward, even areas that start with winter weather will likely transition to rain. A pretty wild setup for early February. Behind this system, will we see a cold air intrusion? More energy will continue to move across the Rockies and eventually into the central U.S. As we look further ahead, we're entering that unreliable time frame, days 7 through 10. However, there are hints of an overrunning setup across the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Northeast next weekend, February 8th through 9th. Looking specifically at the National Weather Service's temperature outlook for February 4th through the 8th, it shows a very interesting picture. Warmer than usual conditions will dominate the four corners, south central and southeast U.S. This will likely push temperatures into the 60s and even 70s in some places, offering a nice respite from the colder weather we've been experiencing lately. But the cold won't be far behind. The west will be cooler, especially in the northern Rockies and northern plains where temperatures will dip below average. And this sets the stage for some sharp temperature swings, so expect those to play a role in where the storms develop. As for precipitation, we can expect activity to ramp up across much of the country. The west will be particularly affected, with significant snowfall expected in the mountain ranges, especially the Rockies, Sierra Nevada, and Cascades. These regions could see feet of snow by the end of the week, which will have a huge impact on ski resorts, transportation, and general travel conditions. But the snow won't be limited to the west. We could see heavy rain, snow, and mixed precipitation across the Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. If the temperatures drop enough in these regions, it could turn into significant snowstorms, especially in the Northeast, which is always a hotspot for winter weather. Looking further ahead to the 8 to 14 day outlook for February 6th through the 12th, we're starting to see the potential for even colder conditions. While the warmth from the previous week will still linger, the cold air is gradually pushing eastward, and that could have a big impact on places like the Plains, Midwest, and eventually the Northeast. The models indicate that this period could bring more frequent snowstorms, particularly across the upper Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Great Lakes. The storm track could also shift, meaning snow might start accumulating across more parts of the East Coast. To give you a better idea of how this all fits together, let's look at the temperature trends for the past 30 days. We've had quite a bit of cold weather across much of the country, especially in the central U.S., where temperatures have been 5 to 10 degrees below normal in many areas. This is considered an extreme anomaly, particularly because temperatures like this aren't typically seen for such an extended period. Many areas have been experiencing sub-freezing conditions, with the Rockies and Plains dealing with more significant cold snaps. When you see these temperature deviations over a month-long period, it's a good indication that we've been in a more extreme cold pattern But don't worry, the warmth is on the way. As we zoom in on specific weather patterns, we can see some major storm systems forming across the United States. In fact, the first round of thunderstorms is expected to develop as early as February 1st, with Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana all seeing storm activity. This could include some severe thunderstorms, particularly along a warm front pushing up into the eastern U.S. These thunderstorms are expected to track northeastward, bringing the chance for some mixed precipitation across the Great Lakes, Northeast, and Mid-Atlantic. If you're in those areas, be prepared for snow showers and potentially icy conditions, especially if the temperatures remain chilly. And by the time we hit the weekend on February 3rd and 4th, the weather will be getting even more active. A series of low-pressure systems will be moving through, bringing snow to the Rockies and Cascades, while the Midwest, Great Lakes, and Northeast will see a mix of rain and snow. The snow in these areas could accumulate with up to a foot or more expected in some parts of the upper Midwest and Great Lakes. By February 6th, a more intense storm system will begin to take shape in the Midwest, with heavy snow possible across the Great Lakes and Northeast. This could lead to significant disruptions for cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland. So it's something to keep an eye on. By February 8th, we could see another round of snowstorms, particularly along the East Coast. This time it could impact cities from Boston down to New York and even further south into parts of the Mid-Atlantic. We're looking at a potential snowstorm that could leave a few inches or even a foot of snow in these areas. Meanwhile, the West will continue to see snowfall in the major mountain ranges, with significant totals in places like Colorado and Utah. These mountain ranges could see multiple feet of snow in just a few days, making for great skiing conditions. But it's also important to keep in mind the impact on travel in the region. As we move into the second week of February, the overall pattern remains active, with more storm systems expected to push through. The weather in the West will stay snowy and cold, while the central U.S. could experience a mix of both warmth and cold. This fluctuation will keep us on our toes as we track snowstorms and severe weather across the country. Looking at total precipitation for the next 2 weeks, the European model is predicting heavy moisture to move across the country, with significant precipitation expected in the Northwest and extending into the central U.S. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future updates. I'll see you in the next one.